This is a Voyescape podcast. You can find all of our travel podcasts from around the world at voyescape.com.
Okay, we are back. We are back talking about episode 2 of White Lotus. Katie, could you describe this episode for me in like 2 or 3 words?
I would say monkey bananas.
Nice. First thing we need to talk about, because we did bring it up in our first recap, so this is just a follow-up about why the opening music has changed.
Ooh.
So I did some digging. According to Screen Rant, the composer says that the new intro song aligns with the themes that the season will explore.
Ooh.
So
I mean, that kind of checks out. I feel like that makes sense.
And they also mentioned that they wanted it to sound more like aligned with traditional Thai music. So it was definitely a decision.
Yep.
I'm still not sure it's a decision I'm on board with, but that's why.
I will say I was thinking about this. So when I watched the first episode of White Lotus, Mark fell asleep. He rewatched it recently a couple days ago. And then we watched episode 2 together. But anyway, I was upstairs bopping around in the kitchen or whatever while Mark was watching it. And I was hearing it through another room, and it had 2 things come to mind. One, the monkeys are very prevalent in episode 1 that I didn't sort of notice, and it was just funny because I was hearing it from another room, so you just really hear like the soundscape of the monkeys.
Yeah.
And then 2, I was really admiring the score and the soundtrack of the show all being sort of Thai. But that being said, I also was like, I'm assuming it's all Thai, and what if this is not Thai and it's commentary on white people watching the show? Just being like, wow, Thai culture, but none of it's actually Thai. So I need to double check that.
I don't know enough about traditional Thai music, but that would be an interesting question. Let me see if I can reach out to a friend of mine who has Thai heritage who might know.
Yeah, that would be great. But there is a cover of, I think, an Ozzy Osbourne song that's in Thai in there. It's fun. Really fun.
They also played like Krongbin in this episode, in
What's
episode
that?
2, just like a really sweet like music duo from the US. I was also noticing the music, like the music is good in this show.
Music is really good.
One other thing I want to say about the opening sequence, because I watched it again very carefully, and this time on my second watch, I noticed that throughout the opening sequence, through the paintings, you start to notice that there's this theme of the wildlife encroaching into the human space and causing conflict. And I'm now starting to notice that in the like narrative of the show as well. I was going to talk about this later, but it's worth bringing up now. The final scene of episode 2 is like a pan out from one of the villas, and it shows the jungle, like how large the jungle is and like how it's closing in almost on the villa. And I was just thinking, like, this is a theme for sure.
In that shot too, the soundscape of the monkeys gets louder and louder and louder too.
Yeah.
So can I lead to a theory that I have right now? Can I just jump to this?
Sure.
I said right off the bat, this is what I said before I even watched the full episode. I have a new theory about who's dead and who shot.
Yeah.
I still think the monkeys are the ones that are shooting the guns. I think they kill Belinda, and I think they kill her when she's trying to diffuse a situation between other visitors where monkeys have like maybe come in and like caused havoc, and she's trying to because she's a good person, she's a good Samaritan, so she's coming in trying to diffuse something and then maybe gets shot.
This sounds like a bit bonkers, but I'm on board.
It's White Lotus. Is it really that bonkers? It is
very White Lotus, yeah. And it would be very White Lotus to kill off a character that we like, especially one of the only characters that's actually good.
Yeah, exactly. But I also have my doubts as to if Belinda remains a good person throughout this whole show.
Yeah, I'm having those doubts too. We'll get into it.
Okay.
Okay, so episode 2 felt a little bit like another laying the groundwork episode to me. It was a lot of like learning things about the characters, their dynamics, their connections to each other. Oh, one other thing though I wanted to mention before the recap. Did you catch that the original theme music does appear in this episode for a very brief moment?
In all caps in my notes here.
Yeah.
Theme song back, shot of monkey.
Yeah. So now I'm wondering if we're slowly going to get that theme song coming back, the original, if there's like more, if there's more of a strategy behind this.
Sorry, I have 2 more other fun facts before we get into the recap too. These are things, so for anyone that's not familiar, my fiance Mark, big movie fan, big film fan, listens to a lot of film and recap podcasts and that kind of thing. He mentioned 2 things to me because I feel like with White Lotus, you can't help but like theorize and come up with like conspiracy theories and stuff. He mentioned 2 things to me about how the show might be approaching its characters too that are meta outside of the actual theme of the show. So first of all, the character Saxon, the older brother, finance bro, is Arnold Schwarzenegger's son. And he was like, there could be something there around strength or like manliness or whatever that they just bring. Sometimes they bring in actors because of, I don't know, they meta critique on other things. And then also the actor, and I might need to double check this, the actor who plays the general manager, Fabian, his name is Christian Friedel. He's been in another movie apparently about like rich people and poor people together and like dynamics there. So this isn't his first rodeo in this type of like narrative.
I'm realizing I recognize him. I should look up what movie he's in. Hold on, I need to know now. Christian Friedel, what is he in? He's in The Zone of Interest.
Yeah.
Which is a fantastic movie if anyone listening hasn't watched it. Oh, he's in like a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah, he's sort of that guy.
All right, so we open with the gal pals, picking up basically exactly where episode 1 ends. Lori is in her room and Kate and Jacqueline are on the couch and they are having a very gossipy and honestly condescending discussion about Lori. They comment about her looks, they comment about her career and her messy divorce and about her daughter. So through this gossiping, we do learn quite a lot about Lori.
Erin, they love her so much though.
They love her so much though. Yeah. We learned that her daughter's name is Ellie, which disproves a theory that's been floating around that her daughter is Portia from season 2. So pretty sure that's not the case. She could be Portia's sister.
Maybe.
And Ellie is having a rough go of things from the sound of it. She's apparently been kicked out of multiple schools. And one of the gal pals says, "You just have to wonder about these people who insist on raising their kids in New York." Which, like, as a Torontonian who hears similar comments about living in the city, I was just like, oh, yeah.
Now, okay, can I throw something out there? Because obviously, so this is probably one of the most anxiety-inducing scenes you could watch. Because, like, just watching this type of gal pal behavior is just, as a woman, is just like, it just hurts the soul.
It's scary.
It's super scary. Now, this is the thing. We saw in episode 1, Lori kind of crying. We obviously know her life has changed, but I don't get the sense that Lori's life is falling apart. I think there's change that she's getting used to. But to me, Lori's character kind of comes off as like liberated and fairly comfortable in her own skin. Like she's kind of sarcastic and funny and just like comfortable, I think.
She's the least cringe out of the 3 gal pals, I would say.
So it almost feels like that conversation between Kate and Jacqueline is very much like projection onto Lori a little bit.
For sure. Because we're hearing it through the lens of their gossip. And realistically, like everything that we hear is going on in Lori's life. These are like very real life things that many people experience. Like many people experience divorce and trouble with their teenage children. Like this is not abnormal life stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes divorce is a form of liberation. Oftentimes it is. So it's not like her life is totally crumbling apart, but we don't know everything. But my perception is that Lori is probably doing just fine, but just dealing with regular everyday life stuff.
I agree. And one thing I'll say off the top is we do get many of these gossip scenes. We start to see a trend that like different pairings of these three gal pals will get together and gossip about whoever's not present. I was watching this episode with my friend Sheer, and she made an interesting comment. She was like, I feel like they're overdoing it and it's almost offensive to women to like portray us this way. And I was like, you know what? I kind of agree. Like, it is kind of overdone, but this is like what the White Lotus does. So it's not like misaligned with the themes of the show in general. But
yeah,
I also thought that. I was like, this is like a little uncomfortable.
I feel like I totally see that. And I feel like it has to be done because there is now a level of anxiety every time these characters come on screen where you're like, oh God, what are they gonna say?
Well,
next?
you know, it's all gonna blow up.
It's all gonna come out in the wash. Yeah. And you just are waiting for this moment.
Definitely.
And we almost get it when Lori walks into the room.
So suddenly Lori comes in, which startles them, obviously, and ends their gossip session. She just like kind of charges in because she's forgotten her charger in the room. And Jacqueline and Kate make an interesting comment. They say that they thought the sound of Lori coming in was a monkey. And this is our first monkey reference in the episode. So next we get a montage of everyone waking up the next day. Belinda's, I would say, is the best wake-up call. She wakes up to her alarm and says, where the fuck am I? And I thought to myself, this is a very relatable way to wake up after a long journey when you're extremely jet lagged and disoriented. Also, I wanted to ask you, like, have you noticed how none of these people appear jet lagged? Because having flown that distance before from like North America to Asia, I would not be a normal human for the first 3 days.
I did not notice this, and that is really funny. And also,
but they probably all flew like first class and like had a lie down flatbed the whole flight.
Yeah, and you know who probably didn't? Belinda. And let's also not forget, like, Belinda is also kind of working while she's there.
Yeah.
she's battling the fatigue and like trying to learn things.
Yeah. So we cut to the Ratliff family. They're having breakfast, and we learn that Victoria slept like a corpse because she took her lorazepam.
I died at that line. I was like, I'm using this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. It becomes very established in this episode that Victoria has a dependence on lorazepam. This is obviously going to become more of a thing throughout the season. And then there's a bit of an exchange over breakfast when Timothée pulls out his phone, which is to Piper's dismay. And this leads to Piper criticizing the hotel choice. Timothée claims that the family chose it because it's Piper's kind of thing. And she replies, this hotel is Disneyland for rich bohemians from Malibu in their Lululemon yoga pants.
An iconic line.
Yeah.
Especially just as Kate walks by in her Lululemon pants.
Yeah. So you know who Piper is reminding me of?
Who?
Aubrey Plaza from season 2, because in season 2 Aubrey is clearly the uncomfortable person, like with the wealth and the luxury around her. She's the only one that like really like criticizes it ever. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. And then we have an interesting interaction. One of the gal pals, Kate, walks by and stops to talk to Victoria. And she tells Victoria they've met before, they have mutuals, they actually spent a whole weekend together. And Victoria's reaction is really strange. She is super dismissive of it all and cold, like barely speaks. Afterwards, like one of her sons is like, Mom, like, why are you being so weird? So yeah, I couldn't figure out if this was a result of the lorazepam or if there's something weird going on here. What do you think? Like, I don't know if lorazepam would make you that weird in that kind of interaction.
It's so hard to say what is going on with Victoria in this moment for me, because I'm like, this is just... It could have been the lorazepam, and something she says after makes me think that it's like just a hoity-toity like richness, like I'm richer than you type thing. Because I think when you maybe are someone that is this wealthy and has like probably a very wealthy and notable husband is what I'm getting is the impression, then maybe you think you're on a higher level than other rich people and you don't want to go to like a rich people resort and be like buddies with people. You still want people to be like, but you don't want to basically be compared with like the rest of the group. You don't want to be like other people, I think. And when you go to a resort full of wealthy people, you suddenly are like part of the crowd now. You're no longer like this special hoity-toity person. So maybe there was like a little bit of just pompousness there, a little bit, a large part of pompousness there where she's like, no, I'm still better than you, even if we're at the same resort. And if I can get into it, so she has this conversation with her son, and there, we see the back and forth where Kate goes to the girls and she's like, guys, we spent like literally an entire weekend together. Like, I don't know why she's pretending she doesn't know me. And then we go back to the family and this conversation between Victoria and her son. And her son's like, I think she's a pretty big deal. Like, she's friends with Jacqueline Lemon. Like, she's a pretty big actress. And Victoria says, actors are basically prostitutes. And this made me write down, I was like, I don't want to know what she thinks about like the rest of the service staff. She just, I think, and this comes up in the episode, she thinks everyone is just trying to get something from her.
Yeah.
And so she's very protective of that. If I can say it, big Republican energy.
Oh, 100%. And aren't they from Texas?
Yeah.
I also feel like this interaction, the scene, it definitely has purpose. So like, I feel the fact that Kate and Victoria have met before is going to come back and have some sort of development.
The girls love drama too. I foresee Kate has a little bit too much wine. She goes back to Victoria and she's like, hey, I just don't get how you don't remember me. We literally spent an entire weekend together. There is a little bit of like cuckoo bananasness, just like just resting at the surface of all of these people, as is White Lotus. And the monkeys are just going to like bring it all out.
I think you're right.
The monkeys will bring out your insecurities. I don't know why, but they will.
Well, it could be that the monkeys are like a metaphor for, the cuckoo bananas-ness of all these rich people. Okay, so the day officially launches, which means the characters are starting their health and wellness programs. So we get a montage of everyone doing their thing. Piper's doing yoga. Victoria's getting a massage, which, as she mentions before, can only be done once she's had her lorazepam. And like just seeing how much lorazepam she takes throughout the day, like I'll like admit I have taken lorazepam for my generalized anxiety in like really tense moments, and like seeing how much she has consumed is bonkers to me.
Okay,
like,
this is actually good
like
context.
It's a lot. A dangerous amount.
Can you explain, is there a way you could explain that if you had taken as much as her, like what you would be feeling?
I'd honestly probably just be asleep, I think, because even like when I've taken it, like, when I've taken it, it's like a very small dosage, and even that small dosage makes me pretty tired. And it does make you very, like, the way she acts as kind of like there, but not really there. That is kind of true. You're not really absorbing things. Like, just to like get more into it, I used to take it ahead of medical appointments where I was like typically getting bad news. And I noticed that like I would get bad news and I would leave and it wouldn't like hit me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't process it, which was the point, because like it was too anxiety inducing.
I feel like this explains Victoria's reactions to Saxon's creepy jokes, especially the ones about his sister. She's just like, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't he so funny? Whereas like anyone who wasn't on lorazepam, I feel like would be like, that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah. She's definitely not processing things in the same way, I would argue. I don't know though. Like I've never taken that much, so I don't know what happens, especially if that's like habitual for you, but definitely not healthy.
Yeah. You mentioned that everyone's doing their activities. I thought this was really funny, the like dichotomy of scheduled relaxation. Thinking about like the logistics of like this scheduled relaxation, while like literally every person has like their own handler, own staff member basically at their activity. Other than if you're like in the gym, there's a lot of scheduling and like really meticulous flow that has to go behind the scenes to make it feel seamless. So it's very interesting just seeing that all happen.
So I'll actually mention something I've read about out of curiosity, mostly on Reddit. I read several threads about why it would ever be worth it to spend like thousands of dollars on a hotel. Someone was asking, like, what is the difference in experience? Like, once you get up to like 1,000 a night, what's the difference between that and let's say like 5,000 a night? So people were talking about their experiences in these like extreme luxury hotels and resorts. And the key differentiator that I learned from this thread is that everything just happens for you. So if you want to eat a specific thing, you tell your butler and the next day you will have that thing. If you need to go somewhere, the car will be arranged for you. One person gave an example that they had like gone on a day trip and coming back, forgotten their phone in the car. And they told their butler, and like 20 minutes later, they had the phone for them. They didn't have to do anything. So it's kind of like everything is happening around you behind the scenes. They remember like your favorite drink. They remember every single detail that you mention. So it's just about like having everything done for you in a super extreme way, and where you do not see what is happening in the background to make these things happen.
You forget about the logistics of literally planning anything.
Yeah, it's almost like in a regular hotel, like the exchange is very obvious. Like you're paying money to stay in a room, and the room is the thing you're getting in exchange for your money. Whereas at these luxury places, you're also paying for this experience of being waited on, I guess.
I mean, it sounds tempting, but
it does. But like, it also sounds creepy, kind of.
Yeah.
Anyways, we see a bit of Rick's therapy session with Amrita, and we learn basically that he is in a constant state of stress. Amrita tries to dig into this a bit, and this is when we learn some troubling things about Rick's past. His mother was a drug addict and OD'd when he was 10, and his dad died before he was born. So Rick has had a difficult childhood. It's definitely becoming clear that he has some demons he's battling.
Yeah, I am willing to bet. I don't know if Amrita is really prepared for this type of therapy session with Rick.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be like a stress meditation, and she's like unleashing all these demons from him. And he's very nonchalant about it all too. Yeah. Which I can imagine if you weren't expecting these kinds of things to come out of like a person at your resort who typically is a very privileged person attending there and probably has very surface level problems that they're sharing with you. This must have been intense for her. Very intense.
I think being a therapist in general must be an intense job. You have
she
to
a
hold a
therapist,
lot of
though?
pain.
This is
what
the
makes
thing.
it harder for her, 'cause she's not technically.
I don't think she's a therapist. Like, I think she's just a meditation guide.
Yeah. Also of note is that all throughout these wellness scenes, we get like within the montage clips of monkeys.
Yes. And I'll also mention this is when the theme song comes back and we get a shot of the monkey, which is right after Rick's therapy meditation session.
Yeah. Okay. So the next important scene is Guy Talk and Mook. They're having lunch together, and Guy Talk confesses that he likes her. Like we didn't already know that.
Yeah.
And then he launches into the reasons why they could be a great match. He argues that their families are friends, that they're from the same town. And this was like really cute. He's like, you're smarter than I am. But although I'm not a genius, I'm a really handy guy. So he basically like argues that they're just like a perfect pair. And Moot kind of deflects these advances and kind of leaves it at, well, we've never been on a date. So it's kind of left like up in the air. But I think more is to come.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm curious why she deflects. And I think maybe she's just a professional. I think she is like very much, her job is her identity maybe, or some capacity. So I'm curious to see what comes from this.
I'm wondering if it's just one of those situations where she's like never like thought about him in that context. Who knows though? Meanwhile, the gal pals have reconvened after their wellness sessions and they realize a few things. So Lori and Jacqueline are told that their numbers from their health tests are so good that they look like they're like the numbers of people half their age. And Kate is clearly peeved that he did not tell her that. He just told her numbers were average. And then this just launches them into another like uncomfortable discussion where they just like talk about their eating habits, talk about their bodies, compare their bodies. There's a lot of like uncomfortable stuff that is discussed. One thing of note that comes up in this discussion though is that Jacqueline is married and her husband is 10 years younger. It sounds like they've not been married very long, and she does make a comment about how their marriage is really good.
And they're obsessed with each other.
Yeah. They're obsessed.
The biometrics thing was funny because it tells, the show lines it up where we find out that the girls are going to get the biometrics tests. And I wrote, oh no, the girls are going to be comparing themselves so hard. Oh no, oh no, oh no.
Yeah.
And then of course we do get the results and Lori's numbers are very good. And I was not. I was totally expecting this. Like, I don't know. For some reason, I found myself on Team Lori.
I think I'm on Team Lori, like in general, when it comes to the gal pals.
Yeah. I'm definitely Team Lori. It's hard to explain why because she also partakes in goss, but I think it's because we feel she's a more regular person.
She's probably the most relatable out of the three gal pals to us.
Yeah. I also noticed the blocking between Jacqueline and Lori after the biometrics test. They are pictured closer together after the results are revealed, which is interesting. So Kate is like sort of getting separated because her body isn't the same as theirs. Oh, it was crazy.
Interesting too. Jacqueline and Lori are the only pairing from the gal pals that haven't had a gossip session yet. So I'm assuming we'll get that in the next episode. But yeah, it's kind of like their dynamic is like, and to be honest, it is relatable in a sense because I do recall having dynamics like this, especially in high school.
100%.
Where I would have like groups of friends where we were three girls and there was always this push and pull for like who was the closest out of the three, which is really like problematic, but I think it's very common, especially like in young women. And we do know that Kate, it's sort of implied that Kate and Jacqueline see each other more because they live together in LA, whereas Lori's in New York.
Jacqueline says she hasn't seen Lori in 4 years, and otherwise they do like a couple dinners a year or something. Yeah, so we'll see how that plays out.
So now we have the climax of the episode. Chelsea and Chloe are in the resort's jewelry shop when an armed and disguised man comes and robs it. We don't know who the armed robbers are, but we do see that Valentine may have been involved in letting them into the resort.
Oh, I didn't catch this.
There's like a clip right before where it looks like almost like he's distracting guy talk so that these guys can
Valentine?
Enter. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I know. He's not a very memorable. He's kind of like, he's just like so good looking. He's like one of those copy paste characters where you could just mistake him for anyone.
He's like a perfectly toasted piece of like white bread.
But yeah, that was Valentine. So I'm starting to get the sense that Valentine may be involved in some sketchy things. And then as the armed robbers are escaping, they assault Guy Tog. And the scene destroyed me. I love Guy Tog and he must be protected at all costs.
I know. I love him. And I was worried that he was going to get, like, he does go back to his job that day. Like, he doesn't take the rest of the day off or anything like that. But I was happy to see that it seemed like he was one of the first people attended to in this situation and not just like totally abandoned and asking like how all the visitors are and all that stuff. That's what I was fully expecting from this scene. There's like a beautiful reunion between Rick and Chelsea. And so we get like their kind of experience of like Chelsea saying, I almost died today. So good. But yeah, poor Guy Tog. Love him so much.
So now we cut to dinner. Where we learn a few key things. We discover that Greg appears to be using an alias because in this scene you notice that Chloe calls him Gary. This is Greg and Rick meeting for the first time, and they have this like back and forth about like what they do for work, and they're both retired, and then they're like, what did you do? And Greg is like, this and that, and then he asks Rick, and Rick is like, this and that. So
like there's a lot of good work in this and that.
So we learn that Chloe and Greg met in Dubai through a dating service. There's also a funny moment here where Greg calls Chloe French and she retorts that she is not French. She is from Quebec. And this is an important distinction. Very important. Quebec is not France. Yeah. She is French Canadian. And also like important to note is that Charlotte Le Bon, who's the actress playing Chloe, actually is from Montreal. So she is Canadian. She's one of us.
Hey, look, it's the meta casting again. Look at that.
Yeah.
This is funny because Chelsea and Rick's relationship is pretty funny to watch because Rick is the grumpy guy. Chelsea just wants him to be happy. And I kind of get the sense like there's this sort of slow motion of her running into his arms after the robbery. And he seems like genuinely like happy to see her and scared for her and comforting her. And then they have dinner with Chloe and Greg, or aka Gary. And they are looking at each other as the two kind of bicker, as Chloe and Gary bicker and kind of argue over petty things. And Chelsea and Rick seem to like be coming closer together after this dinner scene. And then obviously, this is probably in your recap already, but the show ends in them like having sex and they seem very passionate and happy about it. But yeah, it was just funny that like sometimes when you're maybe you're in like a little bit of an argument with your partner and then you go and hang out with another couple and realize how like dysfunctional their relationship is and you feel better about yours.
Rick and Chelsea just give me like their relationship doesn't seem the degree of transactional that like Chloe and Greg's does. It does feel different, but it does also not feel like healthy really. Like they do have problematic arguments. He does treat her pretty badly.
He calls her an idiot at one point and like is serious about this.
Yeah. So like I'm wondering if there's some degree of transaction there because like she's obviously living a very nice life by being with him, but it's not a nothing relationship. There's bones there for sure, and you do see that a little bit in this episode more than you did in the first one because there's intimacy between them for sure. The other key thing that's learned at dinner is that Shritala, who does a performance for the guests, is going to be heading to Bangkok the next day to see her husband. And who overhears this? Rick.
Mr. Rick.
Yeah. So we cut to Rick and Chelsea back in their bedroom. And this is when Rick tells her that he, quote unquote, needs to go to Bangkok for a night or two to deal with something. So we know that the thing he has to deal with is likely Shritala's husband, Jim, who Rick is trying to find. Chelsea doesn't probe very much about this. Like, she doesn't ask a lot of questions, which is so funny to me because, like, if I was in Thailand and Luke was like, I'm going to Bangkok tomorrow, I'd be like, excuse me, like, why am I not coming? Am I not part of this mysterious mission? She just, like, doesn't ask questions. She's just like, okay.
She's just vibing. Chelsea's just living her best life, trying to be happy, go lucky, and I don't know what her deal is.
And then they just have sex. And at this moment, my friend Sheer was like, wow, Rick is really hot.
You know who else is really hot? Porn Chai.
We're going to get in. So it's hard because the show is so long. It's really hard to recap it. So I kind of decided like, we'll talk about the emerging flirtatious dynamics like separately. Okay, so now we have our final scene of episode 2, which is Timotei. So I haven't talked a lot about him throughout the recap because basically like the same thing is happening to Timotei the entire day. He is on the phone trying to deal with whatever situation is happening at home. And it is not good. Throughout the episode, it becomes obvious that like he is really in trouble. And towards the end of the episode, we see him on the phone with his friend and colleague, Kenny. And we learn that they have committed some sort of fraud. It sounds like money laundering to the tune of $10 million. I thought it was funny that Timotei was like, only $10 million. And I was like, what?
But it seems like, I don't know, because I feel like my brain went into like, yeah, it is only 10 million. Like this seems very serious for 10 million, but 10 million is a lot of money. But I think
lot of
like
money.
when you exist in the world of wealth, even just through a TV show, you start to like diminish the value of that money.
Oh, definitely.
So yeah, because it seems like he's going to go to jail 100%.
Yeah. So that's what we learned. Kenny says, like, I'm probably going to jail. Timotei asks, like, am I implicated? And Kenny is like, yes, you are implicated.
Are.
So Timotei has realized that he needs to lawyer up. It would be very stressful to be on an opposite time zone with this happening back home.
Yeah, or as Timothy calls it, he's at the antipodal ends of the earth from humanity.
What a quote.
Thailand.
Yeah. And this segues into that final scene we brought up at the top of the episode where we see him sitting kind of like tucked into the foliage outside of his villa on his phone while he's trying to lawyer up. And it's an interesting scene because he's like tucked away in the foliage and he watches his family, who clearly has no idea what's going on. They're like walking into the villa together, and it kind of positions him as like being outside of the family and separated from the family, which I think is probably a representation of the fact that like I get the sense that he does not share with Victoria or the children like what is actually going on in his life. And I'm thinking like he probably won't tell them that like he's probably going to jail when they get back to Texas.
Interesting.
It positions him as an outsider from the family.
Okay, this is interesting because I had a different theory here, but also I think you're probably right because there's a scene where we basically, Victoria is talking to her kids, and I think this is at breakfast or something. I might be skipping ahead here, but we find out she's basically conditioning her kids to look out for scammers. And she already said like actresses are prostitutes. Like she thinks everybody is out to like try and get something from her. And she says like the kids need to stay hyper vigilant because they're gorgeous and come from money. This is the fun dichotomy here where like her husband is a scammer himself and she's married to him. And I was thinking maybe she's in on it and she's just like, I don't know. You know, when people just like deflect so much because they're trying to protect something?
I don't think she is, just because of the dynamic of their relationship and what we've seen. Like she has no idea what's going on. And I think that's part of the lorazepam.
That's what I was thinking.
It's like they're really hammering home that Victoria has no idea what is going on. And I think it actually could play into why he's being positioned as an outsider from the family, because he knows that Victoria and his children will disown him. Yeah. Because he's his father and he's going to go to jail, but also because when this happens, like what's going to be gone? Yeah. Their money.
Yeah. And Victoria clearly loves her status. Yes. Very much.
Yes. And this is when we get the pan out from the villa like back into the jungle. And then one important thing to note is I did notice when Timothée was on the phone talking with Kenny, Guy Talk was nearby, and you kind of get the sense like he's shown in frames. So I was wondering if like they're positioning this as like Guy Talk is picking up on what's going on. I'm not sure, but it does make you wonder about like the staff, like positions like that. Like Guy Talk hears and sees everything. Mook hears and sees everything. So it'll be interesting to see how they end up like being involved in these different dramas that are starting to develop. Oh, the other thing I wanted to notice. So we talked about how throughout the episode, like we're seeing more scenes of wildlife. This like, they're definitely showing more of like the jungle versus resort dichotomy. One thing I noticed though is they're showing the monkeys, yes, but they also showed a scene of the cicadas, like really close up in the jungle. So I wanted to ask you if you've ever heard loud cicadas before.
Okay, I've only heard people call them cicadas.
Cicadas. I could be totally wrong.
Yes, they exist in Ontario.
No, I know, but like, have you heard jungle cicadas?
No, I've never heard jungle cicadas.
Because Ontario ones are loud, but in the jungle, they're actually like, you can't hear yourself think.
Oh my
God.
So cicadas
loud.
are wild. I always make a joke that they, the reason why they're so loud is because they're yelling about how hot they are. Because you only ever hear them when it's like super hot outside. And you're just like, yeah.
Hence why you hear them in the jungle. Like I remember when we were in Sri Lanka, it was literally like we couldn't sleep at night because of the cicadas. And they're kind of scary too because you hear them but you don't see them.
Yeah.
Because
they're big too. They're big.
Yeah,
they're big ass
can
things.
be. Are Ontario ones big? I always assumed the ones in Ontario are smaller.
They're probably like the size of like a hair clip.
Okay, because in like in South Asia, they're like this big.
Oh God,
they're massive.
No thanks. No thank you.
Okay, so these are the rest of my closing comments. The general manager is not as unhinged as I'd like him to be. We saw like one scene with him in this episode where like you get a little twinge that he could have some unhingedness to him. But all we really know about him so far is that he might be willing to do some sort of performance for the guests. But this made me miss Armand from season 1 because he was just such an epic character.
He's so good. I also get the sense that this general manager is going to eventually get unhinged because right now he seems dedicated to the sales pitch.
Yeah.
And that is going to change for sure.
I hope so. Yeah. So the other closing comment is we learn in this episode that Belinda recognizes Greg. She sees him for the first time at dinner. And when she notices him, her reaction is really interested. She looks like kind of disgusted. So Shira and I were saying, I wonder if she's like in the loop about what happened to Tanya.
I think from her perspective here, because she doesn't know what happened to Tanya, all she knows is that
she might know that Tanya is dead though.
Maybe, but okay, assuming she doesn't, her perspective here is this is the guy that fucked over that opportunity that I had with that lady.
True.
And totally swept her away from like this friendship we were building and this connection we were building and the opportunity that was going to be there for me. And he totally swept her away. And now here he is at another resort with a totally different girl.
Yeah.
And she's like, all of that was for nothing. Fuck that guy. Like, he's a scumbag kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll have some sort of interaction.
I hope. Point. They have to. They have to. Because I feel like at this point, Belinda is going to be like, hey, what happened to Tanya? Yeah. And something's going to come up there.
There's some flirting happening. In this episode, we see Belinda flirting with Porn Chai. Piper, while she's at yoga, there's this bald man who appears to be a guest at the resort. But we get like quite a long... we get quite a long shot of him looking at her. Yeah. So there's sort of like the suggestion there that like he might be interested in Piper. We get a comment from Chloe that she thinks Saxon is hot. And there's a bit of energy between Lori and Valentine. And the gal pals do make a comment to Lori that she's the only single gal pal, so she should be the one to pursue Valentine. So we got to talk about Saxon.
Yeah.
Because all throughout the episode, he's just like giving me more and more ick.
Blech.
He makes a lot of like problematic comments about sex, and sort of like he leans into a lot of the stereotypes about sex in Thailand. So when he goes for his massage, afterwards he goes back to the family and they ask him how the massage was, and he makes a comment that it wasn't as good as he expected because he wanted his happy ending. And he talks about how it wasn't a special massage. And then later he makes a comment to Lachlan. Lachlan brings up, I kind of like missed the scene, but the servers are walking away from the table and Lachlan asks if the servers were men or women. And then I think it's Saxon who brings up that they may be quote unquote lady boys. And then Saxon comments, well, they do say in Thailand that having sex is like a box of chocolate. You never know which one will come with nuts. So he's really like playing into the stereotype in a gross way. Like it just, he won my cringy award. Like
he won my cringy. I was just gonna say, can we dole out the cringe right now?
Like those comments, like cringe award. Overall, I just feel like Saxon is a piece of shit and he is on a mission to indoctrinate.
Say it with your chest, Erin.
Sweet Lachlan. He wants to indoctrinate sweet Lachlan with toxic masculinity, and it's icking me out. And you kind of see this dynamic where like he's like Saxon's trying to indoctrinate Lachlan, whereas Piper, it feels like, is trying to like pull Lachlan into like being a good human.
100%.
Yeah. Sheer and I were talking about the name Saxon and how like it's just like an ick name. And Sheer was like, that's definitely on purpose. Like that's why they named him that. I also need to mention that I don't know why I know this, but one of Elong's like 8 million children is named Saxon. No. So it is a cursed name.
It is a cursed name officially. I wonder if this is commentary. I don't know. Mike White, you never know what he's up to these days.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And Piper finds out about all the gross shit that Saxon has said about her. She's like deeply offended and grossed out by it all. And I had a whole bunch of theories about these siblings, but I think they're all blood relatives. But I was like, maybe Saxon and Lachlan are the younger siblings from a different like marriage or something, like from like the new marriage. And Saxon is an older brother from, I don't know, but they all call it Timotei and Victoria mom and dad. So maybe that's not the case. It's just a weird dynamic for your older brother to be making sexual comments about your sister.
It is a weird dynamic, but then I'm not surprised because it's Saxon.
Yeah.
Like that's not a dynamic that would happen in my family, but like we don't have a Saxon in our family. Okay, so that I think Saxon like wins the cringiest
100%.
Traveler Award.
100%.
There is another moment in the episode though that I think is worth bringing up. When Rick and Chelsea discuss his stress therapy session, Chelsea says that Amrita is wise, and he says, why? Because she's Indian. First problem here is she's not. She's Sri Lankan. But then Chelsea sassily replies, yes, because all Indians are wise. And it sounds kind of like, I actually don't know if this one's the cringiest award because it sounds like Chelsea like realizes this is problematic and that's why she replies with so much sass. But yeah, it was just like a cringy moment.
I noted
worth
this
mentioning.
down too, and I was almost thinking I might give this the Conscientious Traveler to both Rick and Chelsea in this moment because they both are trying to be like self-aware.
They hold themselves accountable for their problematic
even though
assumptions.
they get it wrong. They get it wrong, but yet they're trying to be like socially conscious in this moment, and I was like, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
And has definitely happened to the better of us for sure.
Are there any other cringy moments that you think should be called out?
Yes, in the fact that Chelsea gets her room comped after the robbery. I don't think that was entirely necessary because
but that's so a thing that would happen on a resort like this.
I know. And I was just like, why did this have to be the first thing you tried to do? Like, what can we get out of this like horrific incident that not only happened to her and Chloe, but like also employees? Like Guy Talk got fully bashed in the face. Like, yeah. And he didn't get anything comped. In fact, he had to go back to work. So I was like, come on, Chelsea. Like, I thought you're trying to be self-aware here. And this is where my expectations of her are, like the bars on the floor. Because also I noticed like she is obsessed with Mook. She calls her cute and all this stuff. I was like, oh, this is nice. She remembers her name and she is treating her like a human, but also she's objectifying her at the same time. Yeah. So it's just like a lot of weird cringiness around.
It's also funny to me because it's not Chelsea's money being spent on the ring. Yeah. It's not. But this is so, I just feel like this is what you kind of assume of like luxury travelers like this. Like they think it's like a principal thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I also wanted to point out at one point, Piper and Lachlan also have this conversation when they're on the hammocks in the ocean. Piper is talking about how she's like sensing a presence and she's seeking that. And Lachlan is sort of like, I didn't feel anything in my meditation. I don't really know. This is kind of falling into like that sort of seeker complex that we've talked about on the show before. And it was funny because I was like, what exactly are they seeking? It's never really explicitly explained what they're trying to find from this wellness retreat. But we've got seekers
Piper
here.
is seeking meaning in her life because she lives amongst her family.
That's probably it. But Lachlan has no idea, and it's because he's a teenage boy who lives in a privileged household, and just doesn't really know what to think about the world yet.
Yeah, you definitely get that sense from him. Mm-hmm. Okay, what about Conscientious Traveler? The only thing I wrote was, I think the only Conscientious Traveler Award that can be given out is kudos to all the people that are trying to say thank you in Thai.
Yeah, that's so good.
Like the one thing they can say in Thai.
I would say
Piper does it all the time at dinner. And then I thought, okay, maybe Piper gets the Conscientious Traveler Award just in general, only because she's the only character who is critical at all of the White Lotus and who shows any interest in leaving the White Lotus and like engaging with local culture.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. I think we both agree. Piper for Conscientious Traveler Award, Saxon for top cringe moment, 100%. Yeah. Well, another recap wrapped up, Erin.
Yep.
Who do you think is dead and shot the shooter at this point?
I think I'm on board with your theory.
All right. The theory is in the books.
I think it could be Belinda.
Sadly, Belinda is still on deck to die. But then,
because part of me thinks that because I feel like it's what Mike White's playbook to kill off a character that we know really well. Mm-hmm. So maybe he'll throw a curveball and not do that this time.
But this episode, I thought, was very predictable. Like, it teed you up for things that you saw coming in, I think, a really fun way. But yeah, I will see how that plays out in the next one.
That's why I was saying this felt like, it did feel like a groundwork, like laying episode still to me, because I just felt like there was so much like establishment happening in this episode. So I think like episode 3 is where we'll start to see things like kind of pop off. Hopefully, because like we have the groundwork for it. Like, Timothée is probably going to jail. Like, the robbery has happened. All these things have happened now, which is laying that groundwork. So I think we're gonna see some stuff popping off in episode 3.
All right. Well, I'll see you next week at the White Lotus, I guess.
Yeah, see you at the White Lotus. If you enjoyed today's episode, you'll love Winging It Travel Podcast. Every Monday, host and friend of mine, James Hammond, shares his adventures from around the world. From backpacking tips to immersive travel stories with guests, it's perfect inspiration for your next trip. Check it out at voyescape.com.